I'm a CSI agent, and I'd like to talk about one of my cases. For those who don't know, CSI stands for Forensic Investigations. Our agents are usually the second to arrive on scene, immediately after the police or sheriffs have completed their initial investigation. It's our turn to start collecting evidence to help as much as possible. We try to prove innocence or guilt based on the evidence. My name is Jim Lee, and I usually work with Bobby. Her real name is Roberta, but she prefers to be called that by her colleagues. She is a very attractive woman, but when it comes to work, she is completely focused on business. We were in the office when the call came. 2 people were shot to death in a motel room. The suspect was found at the crime scene with a gun in his hands. Bobby and I headed to the motel. Looks like this was one of the easy ones. It's not every day that a suspect is standing there holding a murder weapon when the police arrive. When we arrived, we spoke to the lead officer. He told us that they received a call about a shooting. When they arrived, they entered the room. The door was unlocked and ajar. There was a white woman lying on the bed with a black man on top of her. The officer also told us that the suspected shooter was standing there with a gun in his hand and dropped it when they entered the room. He looked at the officers and said he didn't do it. He didn't say anything else. He was shocked and confused. Of course, they did the standard handcuff procedure and read him his rights. He refused to talk. While we were talking, another officer led the suspect out of the room in handcuffs. I looked up and saw that it was my friend, Mark. He saw me and said, "Jim, I didn't do it. I didn't do it." My stomach dropped. We went to high school together. The last time I saw Mark, he was saying that he seemed headed for divorce if he didn't kill her first. Now he won't have to worry about divorce. The picture was not in his favor. Maybe he was going crazy and had an attack of amnesia. I don't know. But I hope the evidence will tell us the truth. He's at a crime scene, gun in hand, his wife in bed with a black man. God, how could he deny all this? Perhaps he was counting on an insanity defense. Bobby and I began our task of gathering information. We finished collecting evidence and went outside to inspect the place. We followed procedure and looked for witnesses, tire tracks, and anything else that could help us. While we were inside, we found a camera on the floor by the bed and took it with us. Mark's car was towed to our garage. We called the prison and said that we wanted to check all of Mark's belongings for signs of gunshots. 3 shots at point-blank range should have left marks. I got a call from the lead officer who said Mark kept saying he didn't do it and that I was the only one he wanted to tell his story to. Damn, I didn't want to get involved in this story. All the evidence pointed to Mark, my old friend. What the hell was I supposed to do? I agreed to listen to his story. I did tell him that all his statements would be recorded. I still have a responsibility to do my job right. I also told him that I always go by the evidence, and right now the evidence is not in his favor, but I will remain neutral until all the evidence is taken into account. I also warned him that if the case went to trial, I would have to testify about the evidence. This will include everything he tells me now. I asked him if he still wanted me to listen. He replied, "Yes, Jim, I trust you to make the right decision," and began to tell his story. I turned on the recorder and sat back in my chair, listening. I didn't know what to do. I had caught Susan cheating on me over and over again, and now I was trying to figure out how to respond. We haven't gotten along for a long time. We were married for 5 years before problems started. We have 2 children, Mark Jr. and Kayla. As you know, Jim, Susan and I got married right after high school. I started working in one of the local factories, and she got a job with her father in the insurance company. Her father is rich, but not crazy rich. He is famous in our area and has great influence. He didn't like Susan dating me at school because I was a popular jock, but of course he told everyone I was dating his daughter. As luck would have it, I broke my leg in the last football game of my senior year. Chances for a scholarship are gone. I wasn't smart enough for an academic scholarship, so college was out. My parents wanted to try to pay for my education. but I told them not to spend the money. I didn't even know what I wanted. After finishing school and my leg healing, my father got me a job in a factory. The work was hard, but well paid. I have tried my best since my father got me into this position. He just died last year. I miss him very much. He was too kind and died too young. Of course, after Susan's father found out that I wouldn't continue my education, he told Susan that he didn't want her to date me until she was pregnant. He was furious, but there was little he could do. Susan and I got married before she started to noticeably get rounder. Her father wanted her to wear a white dress. Of course, when the child was born, everyone understood. Or the baby was born 3 months early due term. Wethy were happy, got a small place to live and settled down. Of course, Susan's father and I never got along. I wasn't good enough for his precious little girl. We moved on and life seemed good. We had arguments like all couples, but her parents always intervened. She said she wanted to work and not stay home with the children. She began working for her father as a secretary in his agency. My mom looked after the children. Susan hadn't even been working for 3 months when our personal life began to decline sharply. She was always too tired or not feeling well. One morning she was getting dressed and put on a short skirt. She wasn't wearing underwear. "What the hell is going on? Are you not wearing panties now?" I asked. She didn't look worried at all. "No, I stopped wearing them 6 months ago. For some reason, I kept getting an infection about every 3 months, and when I went to the doctor, she told me to go without panties." "What about these periods of women's days?" "Of course, then I have to wear them, and it's only for a week. What do you think I'm doing, showing my ass to the world? Most women I know don't wear panties unless they have to." I didn't know what to think. I always thought that most women wore panties. I don't check every woman's butt for panty lines. I knew I would do this from now on. Our sex life had not improved, and all I could imagine was my wife running around showing her ass to everyone. I was talking to a couple of women I was friends with and asked them if they wore panties. They laughed at me until I told them I was serious. "Well, Mark, to be honest, I wear it and I don't. When I wear shorts or pants, I usually don't wear them. If I'm wearing a skirt or dress, yes, I definitely am. I know guys are going to try and look up my skirt, and I don't always seem to sit like a lady. Carol was probably my best friend. If I weren't married, I know I would want to date her. She was always nice and friendly. She was one of the few women I could talk to about my problems. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate your honesty. And yes, I'm trying to look at your skirt too. You're wearing blue panties today," I laughed. "Guys do it. I don't know anyone who doesn't. Maybe not all guys and pigs, but a girl in a short skirt or dress always attracts their attention. So what about Susan? I wonder if she told me the whole truth. I constantly read stories about cheating wives. I think working women are at greater risk of having an affair. Sure, stay-at-home moms may cheat, but working women are attacked every day. It would seem that they need to become stronger in their marriage to withstand the onslaught of persecution. If women also went without panties and men noticed it, wouldn't they be harassed more often? So, I thought, if you take a young, pretty woman like Susan in a not-so-great marriage, and she's out there all day with men staring at her pantless ass, our marriage will be in deep shit. I needed to do something to try and get her back. When she got home from work, I told her that my mom would watch the kids and we could go out to dinner. She grumbled something, but agreed to go. It didn't go very well. All she talked about was herself, her new friends at work, and how much fun they were. This got me thinking. This is where I worked hard my whole life and could never call the work or the people there fun. Why is her place of work so different? She didn't wear panties to dinner either, and we sat down at the table. I tried to follow her eyes and noticed that she was looking around a lot. Behind me, there were men sitting in booths, and I think they were having quite a show. I realized then that we probably wouldn't be able to save our marriage. I knew deep down that she had been cheating on me for quite some time. I decided not to talk to her about it anymore. I lost respect for her. Some things you just know, and all I need now is proof. I felt very sorry for our children. I spent more time with them, and the three of us were always doing something together. They always ran up to Mom when she came home and told her about their day. She always told them the same lies. God, I wish I could be there, but Mommy has to work. I wanted to hit her so hard, but I had to think about the children. It would be bad to have a cheating mother, but it would be even worse if their father was in prison. But now I'm here for something I didn't do. Crap. I kept a close eye on her for the next few weeks. Every time she called and said she would be working late, I asked my mom to babysit and kept an eye on her. She always dated men from the office. I started taking my camera with me and taking pictures of her with her friends. They would always come into motels, and I would take pictures of them as they entered. I've never filmed for more intimate things, just entering the motel. I'm sure they didn't clean there. I knew the marriage was over. After the first time I saw her with another man entering a motel, I began planning a divorce. I no longer approached her sexually. Seeing her made me feel sick. Every time I looked at her, I imagined her in bed with someone else. This has always disgusted me. I once told Susan that if I ever caught her cheating, I would kill both her and the son of a bitch she was with. She just shouted back that she was not afraid of me. She said that marrying me was the biggest mistake of her life. She told me what a bad lover I was. I asked her, "How do you know if you haven't slept with someone other than me? We were both each other's first when we met. So, you really are hanging out." Now she was worried. She tried to think of what to say. She finally blurted out some lame excuse about reading it in some damn magazine and how her friends were telling her how good their sex lives were. Well, screw you and your magazine. If I find out you cheated on me, you're dead. Tell your girlfriends the truth. You'll have to sleep with me from time to compare me. I know that this makes me look bad in the eyes of others. First I threaten her, and then she appears they're dead. No, to be honest, I didn't do that. Susan told me last week, "Mark, I haven't cheated on you, but I want out of this marriage. You're crazy, and I don't love you anymore. Just take your things and leave," I will say, "and my dad will hire us a lawyer, and we will settle our irreconcilable differences. You can take your things and leave. Just don't interfere in my life." I asked her, "What about children?" "You won't take my children. I don't care who your parents are. They do nothing for our children. I want custody, and my mom loves them, and she will help me take care of them. Besides, when you go out with your boyfriends, who is going to look after them?" I asked. I remember how that day she turned her back on me and left. I know she loved children, but to what extent? She didn't want to give up her new sex life for them. And if I had proof, I knew I could get custody. I allowed her to go to hotels with several men from the office. I wanted her to commit adultery. My lawyer told me that this would be the evidence I needed to take my children back. No court would award her children or alimony with such evidence. Yesterday, when I came home, I heard her talking on the phone to her boyfriend. She didn't know I was there, so I just listened. She mentioned the time and the motel, so I left the house and came back through the front door, making noise so she could hear me. When I walked in, she quickly hung up. I asked her who she was talking to, and she said her mother. I already knew it was a lie. I decided that I would follow her, go to the motel, break into the room, and take the photos I needed. I would take them to my lawyer and file for divorce. After Susan left the house dressed like a woman of easy virtue, I took our 2 small children to their mother and asked her to leave them for the night. After I burst into the motel room, I thought there would be a fight and one of us wouldn't be coming home tonight. So I asked my mother to keep the children out of danger. It took a while to get the kids ready and pack their overnight bag. I took my camera and off we went. I left the kids with my mom and got to the motel about half an hour later. I didn't have a good plan. I'm not a weakling, so I figured I could handle any fight. I wasn't really thinking clearly. Now it's obvious. I found the motel and their room, It was a corner room. I was sitting in the car, holding my camera, when I heard 3 shots. I looked up and saw someone quickly leave the room. I got out of the car with a camera and headed towards the room. There was no sound coming from inside, so I slowly turned the doorknob. It opened. I pushed the door and saw that they were dead. I looked down and saw a gun. I don't know why, but I picked it up. I was in a trance. I don't know how long I stood there, but the policeman told me to drop the gun and lie face down on the floor with my hands behind my head. I dropped the gun, as well as the camera, and lay face down. Finally, I managed to choke out. I didn't do it. Then they took me outside, and that's when I saw you. Jim, please help me. That was his side of the story. Plausible? I did not know. I told him we'll look at the evidence and see what happens. I asked him about the man he saw leaving the room. He said it all happened too fast. He didn't see anything except the figure who quickly ran away from the building. He didn't even know if it was a man or a woman. He was dressed in dark clothes. While I was in jail, I took a test to see if he had fired a gun recently. The results were negative, but he showered after being placed in the cell. The remains of gunpowder, if there were any, could be washed away. When I returned to our laboratory, Bobby asked how it went. "Do you believe him, Jim?" she asked. "Bobby, I'm going by the evidence, it doesn't lie. I hope he told me the truth for his sake and his children's sake. But the evidence has to tell us more. So far, it's not in his favor. He was not near the victims, according to photographs and the police report. Whoever shot at them did it from the end of the bed. I told Bobby that it looked like the camera belonged to Mark. He said he was going to take a photo to prove his infidelity. She has already sent them to the laboratory for development. We'll probably have photos tomorrow. We also needed to find out whose gun it was. As Bobby and I talked, we agreed that the suspect, Mark or someone else, must have known the time and place of the meeting. Bobby also said that there were no traces of gunpowder on Mark's clothing. She added that he probably shit himself when he saw what was happening. Maybe there's something here. Perhaps Mark really was telling the truth. The next day was complete chaos. The prosecutor was already putting pressure on us. He received a call from Susan's father saying he wanted Mark to be sentenced to death. We tried to explain to the prosecutor that we still had a lot of evidence to study. He was caught in a room with a murder weapon in his hands. "What more do you need?" asked the prosecutor. His name was Brett. "Brett, we have a few unanswered questions. Nothing major, but still unanswered, and a good lawyer could take advantage of this in court if we don't find answers," I said. "Which, for example?" Brett asked. "The finger test does not indicate that he recently fired a gun. There was no powder residue on his shirt. His fingerprints on the gun lay on top of another set of prints that we were unable to identify. The timeline is poor. Who let him into the room? He walks into the room, shits himself, takes the gun and shoots the victims while holding the camera in his other hand. He stands there for what we assume is 7 minutes holding the gun until the police arrive. Reasonable doubt. Brett, his lawyer just needs reasonable doubt. Give us a few more days, and we'll see what we can find." "Damn, I thought this would be a no-brainer," exclaimed Brett. Bobby looked at me. "You know, after everything you said to Brett, I don't think Mark did it," Bobby replied. "If he didn't do it, I wonder who did. We need to see what's on the camera. We also need a list of other people who stayed at the motel the last 2 nights. There may have been witnesses. By the way, do we have any information about the male victim?" I asked Bobby. "His name was Tony Williams. He was in his early 40s, married, and worked for the same insurance company," Bobby answered. Since temporary custody of the children was granted to Mark's mother, she was allowed to keep them until the end of this case. Susan's parents really didn't want anything to do with them. The next day, Bobby brought all the photos. Mark had a digital camera with over 100 pictures. There were at least 20 different men on them. At first, we thought that perhaps she was a woman of easy virtue. Eventually, we realized that she just liked having sex with different men. All the photos were of different men. It's surprising that Mark didn't lose his temper. He later told us that he thought about children to keep his sanity. We went to the insurance company where Susan worked. Many of the men in the photographs worked there. Mary Brandt met us. She was a receptionist in her 40s, dressed too provocatively for an insurance office, but very attractive for her age. She called Mr. Davis, Susan's father, who tried to tell us that we were wasting our time. We already had a killer, and we needed to go after him. We asked Mr. Davis to speak with us privately. He led us into his office, and we sat down. "What the hell is going on?" asked Mr. Davis. "Sir, there is a small chance that Mark might not be the killer. We need to close a few doors before pressing charges. We have photographs of your daughter with other men. Unfortunately, we need to talk to them, and many of them work here," I answered. "Bullshit. You have your damn killer," he shouted at me. I pulled out some photos of his daughter with several men from the agency entering hotel rooms. "Now, Mr. Davis, I didn't want to bring this up, but we have more pictures of your daughter with other men. I can't believe this happened in front of my eyes. My own daughter. These bastards will pay." "Mr. Davis, we need to talk to these men. What you do after this is none of our business, but we need to talk to everyone now." Mr. Davis called his secretary, and she led us into a room where, one after another, 12 different men from the agency entered. They all said pretty much the same thing. Most of them were married or divorced. None were single. It makes you wonder how many divorces could happen because of one woman with a sex addiction. Why are so many men so weak? Besides, she was the boss's daughter. That in itself made her desirable. One of the answers was very similar to the others. She always showed herself off. "What can you do?" some said. Several men denied having sex with her until they were shown photographs of themselves entering a motel with her. The couple even said they would not talk without a lawyer present. We explained that we were just checking information, but if they felt they needed a lawyer, we would agree, but it would be known and perhaps will raise red flag. Most of them talked to us after that. One guy, Bill, was in love with Susan. He wanted her to divorce Mark, and he was going to divorce his wife and marry her. He was very angry when he found out that most of the office had relationships with Susan. When he found out that she was going on a date with Tony, he was furious. He loved her, and she was going to have sex with a black man. Of course, no one admitted to the shooting. We really thought about Bill. He was almost on the edge. He was definitely on our short list of suspects, including staying with Mark, of course. They almost all asked if we were going to tell anyone about their actions with Susan. We just told them that we keep it secret, but their boss knows about the situation. We knew that after we left the office would be a complete mess. We still haven't found any evidence to justify Mark. In fact, he had even more reasons for revenge. Our next stop was Tony's house. We needed to talk to the wife of the black male victim. Her name was Tashika Williams, a pretty black woman in her 30s. She came to the door in a nightgown and a silk robe. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Mrs. Williams, we are from the CSI crime team, and we want to ask you a few questions about your husband Tony. Firstly, we would like to express our condolences. We know that now is a bad time for you, but we must gather any information we can get as early as possible. Can we come in?" She looked a little worried, but invited us in. We asked all the basic questions, including, of course, her whereabouts the night before. "Look," she said, "Tony and I talked about divorce. We didn't get along very well. He started cheating on me, and I kicked his ass a few days ago. I didn't kill him, and besides, didn't you catch a guy with a gun in your hand?" she asked. "Yes, there is a suspect, but we are not sure that he is the killer. We must check all the evidence. Where were you last night, Mrs. Williams?" At that moment, a man came out of the corridor. "What's going on, Tashika? Who are these people?" asked the man. "They're investigating Tony's murder. They want to know where I was last night," Tashika laughed. She was in bed with me. Damn it. If it's any of your damn business, the big guy replied. May I know your name, sir? I asked. Angel White. If it's any of your damn business. Tashika and I were here all night. If you want, go and check our damn sheets. Stupid damn Tony quit the bag for the sake of that fat-ass Tamara. What a damn fool. Tamara? Who is Tamara? I asked. Tony's new girlfriend, or at least she was. Wasn't she killed at the same time as Tony? Asked the angel. Do you have Tamara's address? We'd like to talk to her. I answer your question, Tamara wasn't with Tony last night. Sorry, we can't give more information right now. Tashika said, be careful when you go to Tamara. Damon, her husband, is crazy. I don't know if he found out about Tony and Tamara. Bobby and I left Tashiki's house. What a mess. Mark's wife slept with anyone. He could have been accused of killing 2 people. Susan's father did not know that 12 of his agents slept with his daughter. One of the men, Bill, loved his daughter and was willing to divorce his wife in order to marry her. The last person Susan slept with was a married black man whose wife had thrown him out and was already sleeping with another man. Now we found out that Tony had a girlfriend and she was married. It certainly wasn't as simple as the prosecutor had hoped. We stopped at Mark's mom's house on the way back to the office. We had a couple of questions for her. Mrs. Moore, I'm Agent Jim Lee, and this is my partner, Agent Bobby Burke. We're investigating Mark's case. Can I talk to you? I asked. Of course. Officer, is my Mark okay? I know he didn't do that terrible thing. He's a good father and was a good husband. He just wanted a good marriage and a happy family. I don't like talking about dead people, but Susan was a bad woman. She had 2 wonderful kids, and she never spent time with them. Oh, sorry, officer. I'm starting to talk and I can't stop. All for the sake of my Mark, she replied. Mrs. Moore, do you know if Mark had a gun? I asked. Yes, he had one. His father gave it to him before he died. He keeps it here in my house. Come, I'll show you. She opened the drawer and revealed a 9 and Luger. She said he kept the bullets in another room because of the children. He sometimes took him to the shooting range. He also had 2 guns that were kept locked in the basement if we wanted to see them. Did you know that he was going to run into Susan that day? I asked. Yes, he took his camera to take photos. I told him not to go, but of course he didn't listen to me. He just wanted to get out of this bad marriage and keep his children. There was no way he would have shot Susan and that man, she replied. Thank you, Mrs. Moore. You helped us a lot. The next day, we stopped by the prison to see Mark and see if he remembered anything else. He basically didn't remember anything. He said his lawyer came and told him to declare himself insanity. He told his lawyer he wouldn't do it because he didn't kill anyone. We checked to see if he had other visitors, and his friend Carol came 2 days in a row. Bobby went to Carol, and I was called to the morgue. We were right about the shooting and how it probably happened. Then the doctor told me some disturbing news. Blood tests were performed and both victims were positive for the disease. Now we had a completely new situation. I called Mr. Williams and told him to gather all his employees for a short meeting in the afternoon. After he objected, I told him that his daughter Antony both were sick and he may have an epidemic if it is not controlled quickly. He agreed to set up a meeting. I told him not to tell anyone about this. We didn't know where the infection started, but everyone needed to be aware together. Bobby returned from her conversation with Carol. She told me she believed Carol was in love with Mark. According to Carol, they were best friends, but were never close. She was ready, but Mark said he wanted to wait until after the divorce. He didn't want to cheat just because Susan did it. Bobby also said Carol claimed she was home alone the night of the shooting. This probably adds another possible suspect. We attended an insurance company meeting. There were about 30 employees there. They were all at the meeting. I was the first to speak. I simply told them that when Tony and Susan were autopsied, they found that they were both sick. The hall became completely silent. This meant that anyone who had sex with one of them could also become infected with the virus. The sanitary inspector took the floor. He explained that anyone who had sex with one of them needed to be tested for the virus. Also, their spouses and significant others who had unprotected sex with them should be tested. He informed everyone that the results would be confidential. He also told them that even if they had unprotected sex, it did not automatically mean they had contracted the virus. A representative from the health insurance company said all tests would be covered by their insurance. If someone chooses not to get tested at that point, they will not be covered for testing for the next 6 months. They wanted to make sure they stopped any possible epidemic now. He also told everyone they have 2 days to tell their spouses or significant others and sign up for testing. We recorded this meeting on video. We wanted to see people's facial expressions when the disease was mentioned. Horror was on the faces of most of the employees. They all looked rather stunned, except for one person. We made copies of photographs of several individuals. I looked at Bobby as she made copies of the photos and thought what a beautiful girl she was. We were both free and we had a lot in common. I thought about asking her out. I definitely should have given it some serious thought. The phone rang, and it was the motel manager. He said he may have some information and a possible witness. The only problem was that he was drunk. We told him that we would be visiting him shortly, and drunk or not, we needed to talk to him. We still wanted to know how the suspect got into the room without making any noise. Mark told us he saw someone leave the door ajar. This seems more likely than any other option. But how did they get into the room without a key? We called on the hotel manager and the clerk who was at the desk that night. We asked the clerk to tell us everything he remembered about that night and asked him not to leave out any details. The clerk began. A handsome, tall black man came to get the key. The woman had reserved the room earlier in the day. He walked up to the counter and paid for the room, so I gave him the key. He said thank you and left. You didn't see the woman then? I asked. No, I didn't see her then, but a few minutes later a woman came in and asked for a second key. She said she was going out and didn't want to bother her boyfriend when she came back. I was a little surprised since she was white, but we have many such cases. To each their own. She gave the correct room number and her boyfriend's name, so since he had just left the office, I gave her the key. I gave him the photographs Bobby took, including 2 of Susan. Do you recognize the woman you gave the key to in these photographs? The clerk looked through about a dozen photographs and handed me one. That's her, a beautiful lady. She was dressed in black, replied the clerk. Are you sure? No doubt, Bobby asked. Absolutely sure. Why do you keep asking? Answered the clerk. Because the person you gave the key to was not the victim, Bobby replied. Oh God, I didn't know. The police wouldn't let anyone near the room, so I just assumed it was the woman. It's okay. You did the right thing by calling us. Where is the drunk gentleman you were talking about now? The manager took me to a room around the corner and knocked on the door. Fred, the police are here to talk to you, the manager said. Fred opened the door and we introduced ourselves. Fred said it was a nice night. He was sitting with the door open just drinking a beer when he heard what sounded like gunshots. He had an old Western on the TV and he just thought he played it too loud. A few seconds after the shots were fired, a woman ran past his door, got into a car parked nearby, and drove away very quickly. She tripped at the door and broke the heel of her shoe. He said he picked it up and put it on the dresser in case she came back for it. She never returned. Didn't you hear the sirens shortly after that? Did the police come talk to you? When we came around the corner, your room was in darkness. I was half drunk. As soon as I lifted my heel, I closed the door, turned off the TV and lights, and went to bed. I didn't find out about the murder until today, when Bob, the manager, told me I should talk to you. I don't know. Can I help you with anything? Fred replied. Can you recognize her from the photograph? No, she just ran by, except she broke her heel. She was dressed in black and even wore some kind of fancy black hat. Was she white or black? Bobby asked. Most likely white, but could also be a light-skinned black woman. Like I said, I didn't see much. Sorry. Do you still have the heel from her shoe? Bobby asked. Yes, here he is. Don't touch him anymore. We can try to get prints on him, I said. Bobby put on her gloves and placed the heel of her shoe in a plastic bag. We thanked Fred and the hotel manager for the information. Now we had another suspect with specific details about her. We went back to the office and laboratory to gather all the information and find out who the gun belonged to. Bobby took the wheel to the fingerprint lab while I checked the gun's owner's information. The gun was registered to Tony Williams. Now we needed to understand how he was killed with his own gun. Bobby returned with the results of matching the prints on the heel of the shoe. There were 2 sets of prints. One belonged to alcoholic Fred and the other belonged to our new suspect. We called the judge to prepare a search warrant. While we were waiting for the order from the judge, the prosecutor came in. He said he could hold Mark for another day or press charges against him. We told him to do what he had to do, but we felt there might be a new suspect in custody by morning. Bobby and I went to Mary Brandt's house. I knew it was late, but it couldn't wait. We had 2 sheriff's deputies with us. I knocked on the door and Mary Brandt looked surprised to see us. Mrs. Brandt, we have a search warrant for your home, I said. Why the hell? You have your killer. Why did you get it? We have a search warrant for a black dress and a pair of black shoes. Please let us in or we'll have to arrest you for obstruction. She let us in and sat nervously on the sofa without saying a word. The officers went to her bedroom and brought back 2 black dresses. We didn't know which one she was in that night, so we took both. Bobby came out of the garage and brought out a pair of high heels with one heel missing. She found them in the trash. Mrs. H. Brandt, these items will be returned to you as soon as we have completed the necessary tests. Sorry for the inconvenience, but we needed this information, is a standard phrase we say when we collect evidence. We went back to the lab and Bobby ran a powder residue test. There were gunpowder marks on the front of one of the dresses, and the heel matched the broken shoe exactly. We were pretty sure we had found our shooter, but why did she do it? The next morning, we went to see Mary Brandt at the agency. We took with us a uniformed officer who would make the arrest. Brett, the prosecutor, wanted to come with us. When we entered the office, Mary looked up, and when she saw us, she became frightened and tears began to accumulate in her eyes. We asked Mary to come with us to the interrogation at the station. Walter Davis came out and asked what we were doing. We explained that we were taking Mary in for questioning and would talk to him later. The deputy handcuffed her, which surprised Mr. Davis, and she was placed in a police car and driven to the police station. I started and read Mary her rights. Mary, we know you committed the shooting. We have witnesses who saw you. The clerk when you received the key, and the man who saw you run from the room moments after the shooting. There are traces of gunpowder on your black dress from the shot. We also have a broken heel of your shoe with your fingerprints on it. We know you killed Susan and Tony, but we'd like to hear your side of the story. Mary realized that she could no longer hide the truth. There was no point in denying it any further. We uncuffed her and the prosecutor. Bobby and I listened to her story. I was the queen of this agency until Walter brought his daughter here. I was the one that all the men looked at, the one they dated and slept with. For many years, I chose the best of the best, as far as possible. All attention was focused on me until this woman appeared. Her father thought she could do no wrong. She sat there day after day, showing off her charms to these men. They no longer turned to me for sexual favors, they turned to Susan because she was younger. I hated her. Tony still came to see me. He was one of 2 black men working at the firm. When he first came to me, I agreed because I wanted to experience the fantasy. Once you try black, you won't come back. I fell in love with Tonatony. There was something special. He was very charismatic. He could bewitch a woman. I got divorced 3 years ago and started sleeping with Tony a year ago. About 3 months ago, he told me that I was the best white woman he had ever been with and was going to divorce his wife and marry me. I was so happy. Finally, I shouldn't have hidden the fact that I had this wonderful black husband. He said the age difference doesn't matter. Last week, I developed a rash. I went to my doctor and she ran some tests. She called me the day of the shooting and told me I had bad news. I was devastated. I went to the women's restroom and cried. After I calmed down, I decided that I should continue enjoying life. The doctor said there are some treatments that can help relieve the pain, but there is no cure. An hour later, Tony called me. He was in his office and asked me to reserve a hotel room for him. I thought it was for us, so I agreed and hung up. After confirming my reservation, I was going to call Tony back and tell him about the disease. When I was about to press the button on his phone, caught fire indicator of his call. This meant he was making a call. I don't know why, but I pressed the mute button and overheard his conversation. He called Susan. She was the one he was going to be with that night. After talking to Susan, he hung up and walked out the back door. I cried and went back to his office. Everyone had already left that day. I had extra keys to all the tables. I knew he kept the revolver in the bottom left drawer. I didn't care anymore. I had a terminal illness, and the man I thought loved me was going to sleep with the woman I hated. All I have left is revenge. I knew the motel and the meeting time since I made the reservation myself. I pulled up and saw Susan waiting in the car while Tony got the room key. I was often with him to know that he only takes one key. As soon as they entered the room, I went to the front desk and asked for a duplicate key. The clerk was surprised to see a white woman, but did not ask questions when he gave me the key. I thanked him and then parked my car on the opposite side of the building. I killed them. I threw the gun and ran out of the room without even closing the door. As I turned the corner to get to my car, my heel got stuck in the grill and broke. I went home, sat down, and fell asleep. I didn't know that the murder had been pinned on Susan's husband, Mark, until the next day. I just decided not to get in touch. May I ask why you suspected me? At the sick meeting, you were the only one who wasn't surprised by the news. We took a photo of you along with a few others and got lucky. You said you had sex with Walter. Does he know you're infected? I asked. No, I think he should find out now. I think his wife will be surprised too. What's funny is that none of these men used protection. They all seemed like neat men in shirts and ties. It's probably true that you can't judge a book by its cover. Even Walter had sex with me without protection. We've been having sex for 6 years. I wonder who infected me. I'll probably never know. The prosecutor charged her with first-degree murder on 2 counts. We were doing the paperwork and closing up any loose ends when Bobby looked at me and smiled. What? Why are you smiling like a cat that caught a mouse? I asked. Bobby replied, I was just thinking about how this case could make a good TV show for CSI. No, that will never happen. You need some kind of romantic or love relationship between the main agents, I replied. We could do that, couldn't we? She asked. You mean, would you be willing to go on a date with me, Agent Bobby Burke? All you have to do is ask Agent Jim Lee, and the answer is yes, she smiled. Mark was released from prison and Carol was waiting for him. It wasn't easy for the kids for a while, but between Mark's mom and Carol, they should have been okay. Mark and Carol began to meet regularly. They took the children with them whenever they could. Mark's test for the disease came back negative. He admitted to me in private that he and Carol were together. Mary was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The entire insurance office was in chaos. We don't know how many cases of contracting the disease have occurred, but we do know that there have been quite a few divorces. Walter Davis, Susan's father, took a test, which came back positive. His wife filed for divorce, but did not tell us the result of her test. Tony's wife and her new boyfriend were also tested. We don't know the results of their tests. Now about Bobby and me. I took her on a date. She looked great. A blue satin blouse with the top 3 buttons undone and a short black silk skirt. Bobby, you're beautiful. I can't believe you agreed to date me. Is it because of the hope of a TV show? I joked. No, it's because I've been secretly in love with you since we met. I was just waiting for you to ask me out, she replied. I looked at her hips. Jim, stop looking at my legs. I know you're wondering if I'm wearing panties after this crazy thing. She smiled and laughed. Well, am I wearing it? I smiled. I won't tell you. That's your next case to deal with, she laughed. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.